Kol omer kra, va'amar ma'ikra, kol habasar chatzir, v'chol chasto ketzitz hasadeh, yavesh chatzir navel tzitz ki ruach Adonai nashva bo. Achein chatzir ha'am, yavesh chatzir navel tzitz udavar Eloheinu yakum leolam. A voice says, cry out. But I ask, what shall I cry? All flesh is like grass. All of its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers and the flower fades when a wind from God blows upon it. Surely, therefore, people are like grass. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of God endures forever. LeDavid mizmor l'Adonai ha'aretz umloa tevel v'yoshveva. Ki hu al yamim yasada v'al nehorot yichoneneha. Mi ya'aleh bahar Adonai u'mi yakum bimkom kadsho. Neki chapayim uvar levav asher lo nasa lashav nafshi v'lo nishba lemirma. The earth is the Lord's with all of its fullness. The world is the Lord's with all of its inhabitants. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in the holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. He will receive a blessing from the Lord and a just reward from the God of deliverance. Bonnie, the first time you and Arnie went out, just the two of you stayed out till 2 a.m. I'm guessing it wasn't the coffee, right? If it were the coffee, we all want to know what brand. But I think it was the words. It was the conversation. It was the chemistry. I know your husband was a scientist, but this was a chemistry of a different kind. Words brought you together. Words are very important. They establish a chemistry and they establish a relationship. And with the two of you, they established a future. I know you said over a year of dating, you probably only had about 10 dates since you were in different cities. So again, what was it? There were hundreds of letters written. Again, what are letters except filled with words? And your husband's words were special. The words that Arnold Caplan chose to use in this world really made a difference to a lot of people. They made a difference to you, certainly in the early days when he expressed himself to you, how he saw the world, the person that he wanted to be, his values, his character. It was the man he wanted to be, and also was the man he already was. And you saw that, and you heard that in his words. He revealed himself to you, and you never looked back. His words mattered to your kids as well. I know he was busy during the day, and he would often have to work after dinner, but when he was with his kids, he was present. He was fully present. And they shared words. And he never spoke about himself. He wanted to hear about them. A person's words reveal a lot about who they are, not only from what they say, but from what they don't say. He didn't speak about himself. And here was a man who really could have spoken about discoveries and developments that he had had that day, but he wanted to hear from all of you. He would lecture in other cities and abroad, and both you and your children would observe how much respect he was given in all the places where he spoke. He was respected because of his words. He went there to share his words with other communities because his words mattered. Not because I say so, but because the world said so. You know, there's a phrase we all use it from time to time. The phrase is small talk. You know what small talk is? We have guests coming over, make some small talk with them. It's sort of a vulgar phrase if you think about it. You know, people do that all the time. They talk about the little insignificant things we share that are time fillers and are usually forgotten because they don't matter. They really don't matter. Your husband wasn't good at small talk because he didn't small talk. He talked and it mattered. His words mattered, the words he shared, the healing that he inspired through his words, the discoveries he prompted with his research through his words. Those words and those actions had a lasting impact throughout the world, and they are anything but small. This was no ivory tower professor. His theory and his belief and his motto was that knowledge has no value unless it's shared. It was the application in real life that mattered. It was the nurturing of new ideas that he lived for. He was a wonderful mentor, therefore. He was devoted to his colleagues. He was also devoted to his disciples, and they loved him. He was a warm human being. He created a sense of family at work as well. He liked taking care of people, and he received back throughout his career, but also more recently during his illness. He received many words back from colleagues who admired him and were inspired by him and were showing him love with their words. Your husband, your father, your grandfather was an incredibly capable and gifted man. And the funny thing is, he had one foot in a world of science and research in which he was brilliant, but he was equally capable and effective as a short-order cook, right? He had one foot in the door of making the best eggs and French toast in, in Cuyahoga County, right? Exactly. Or as a bike rider, or as a caregiver to his grandchildren, or in attending NCAA basketball tournament games, right? Aaron, you and your dad would attend. He would barter his lectures, right, at various campuses in exchange for tickets. Arnie wouldn't have needed this other side to him to have still lived a significant life, but this other side certainly made him more layered, more interesting, more endearing, and more human. He knew his priorities, and his priorities reflected his values. He was not impressed by things. He did not need the most expensive sweater on the shelf. He was not enchanted with name brands. And it's not because he was into self-denial. It just didn't matter. He had more important things on his mind. The brand of sweaters to him were not a big thing. What he cared about was family. What he cared about was people and learning and discovery. What he cared about was the mind. But he also cared about showing up if you needed him, and he would be there, whether at home, whether in each of your lives, or in the NICU with a grandchild. As I said, he knew what was important. Fighting illness was important. Discovering and isolating stem cells was important. Improving the treatment for multiple sclerosis or osteoarthritis or cancer or spinal injuries was important. But so was feeding his child, and so was feeding his grandchild, and so was taking care of you when you hurt yourself last year, Bonnie, when he took care of you, and making sure his son-in-law and daughter-in-law felt like family. That was important. And so was starting this business in regenerative medicine with his kids. Not only was it important work, but he wanted to do it with the two of you, with his kids. And Rachel, you said you got to know him better in certain ways during those interactions than ever before. It was actually wonderful for the relationships of the family. It was another way for you and Aaron to recognize the value of your father's work, as well as to interact with him, to understand him better, and even to challenge him at times. It wasn't just about science. It was about love, and it was about loyalty, it was about relationship, and it was about understanding another human being. I'll tell you one more thing that was important and that really wasn't all about science. It was about Bonnie sending you a note each Saturday along with a flower. That wasn't science. It was words. It was the value of his words. I think he recognized and marveled about the journey of his life. He had started with somewhat of a tough upbringing. He loved his parents, he loved his extended family, but it was a rough culture out of which he grew. And he journeyed from that to all that he experienced in his research and with all of you. And he recognized in you, Bonnie, someone who would encourage and believe in him, but you also needed buy-in from him in terms of expanding his life. and seeing some of the color and the vibrance that you were going to bring into his life with travel and with adventure and with different experiences, and you shared with him that beautiful sense of adventure. And yours was a shared adventure of both the heart and the mind, and you two, again, never looked back. So, Bonnie, it wasn't the coffee. I don't think it was the coffee. You felt loved. You said your husband always wanted to know truth was important to him. Here's the truth. You felt loved. And he felt loved. You know, in science, you do trials, right? You conduct experiments, you come up with a hypothesis, and then you try to prove it or disprove it because you present evidence. So I have produced the evidence for today. The world is a better place, and there's more healing in the world because of your husband. That's truth. And your life and the life of your family took on greater significance. And you lived a life of greater meaning because you two found each other. I rest my case. He lived with a good name, and he died with a good name. Bonnie, you're next.
Your being here touches us, and we're grateful. After 58 years, you think you know someone fairly well. But in the past 6 weeks or so, there have been lovely surprises. Friends, colleagues, and family have graciously written to him and to us. And the stories that they tell have been thoughtful, enlightening, and have touched our hearts. People talk of how he changed their lives, motivated them, challenged them, and loved them, and how they loved him. In the science world, most of the people are male. And in our chauvinistic world, men do usually not speak of loving each other. But in almost all of those messages, those guys talk about how they loved him and how they knew that Arnold loved them and how his love and his passion for science and learning motivated them. Arnold was a smart and complicated guy. People ask, 58 years, how'd you do it? There are, of course, the obvious shared values, very liberal in our worldview, truth, caring, being Jewish, a sense of responsibility to community, to the world, and of course, family. But there were a couple of characteristics that we don't usually talk about. Arnold was a strong guy, and he had firm views, but he did have the ability to hear an opposing or a surprising idea and change his mind. Sometimes he'd say no, but sometimes he'd come back and change his opinion to a yes. And not being dogmatic or rigid is a very helpful trait in a relationship. That ability played out often in things that had to do with money. We called it hit and run. I would throw out an idea and then walk away. He would cogitate. And then often he'd come back with a yes. Or if not a yes, then an okay, if those things were out of his comfort zone. You know, he grew up in a family that knew love, but they didn't have a lot of money. And usually my big ideas had to do with spending money. When I decided it was time to move to a bigger house, he did get to agreeing with me that it was a good idea, but he would not. He could not sign the purchase agreement. So the houses were always in my name. And when we were planning Rachel's wedding, I would come home and tell him about the flowers, for example, and he would say, "How much?" And I would respond, "Keep working." I do think humor is another very important and helpful trait in a relationship. We had fun. Arnold was funny. Not the tell a joke kind of funny, but the seeing the funny in a situation. We laughed a lot, and bless him, he thought I was funny. He didn't usually laugh at me, but along with me. Laughter does lighten the load and helps you get through the hardest times. These last 6 weeks were brutal, but he and we did have moments of laughter at the absurdity of the whole situation, and it really was very helpful. Until the pandemic, he traveled a lot, and I used to make jokes that his traveling helped our relationship, because often when he left, I was ready for my own space, but was happy when he returned. I don't think that's going to happen this time. I really will miss that guy.
All right, so this is going to be a letter to Grandpa from the grandkids. Dear Grandpa, from the bottom of our hearts, we love you. Although sometimes it felt like you were larger than life, a man who came from nothing that rose to the top of his field, looking back at our time together, we will always remember you as simply Grandpa. Someone who loved going on long bike rides and walks with her grandkids. Someone who made French toast with us for breakfast. Someone who took us on the train to Terminal Tower on play dates. Someone who loved to share his knowledge, wisdom, and interesting stories. Someone who is caring, maybe a little stubborn at times, and filled with love. Someone who started from scratch to create a family and community that is and always will be held together by love and the desire to build each other up. For the next however long, there will be a lot of tears. Losing someone just plain sucks. But slowly, this grief will pass, and in its place will be memories of joy, humor, and especially love. We will remember you as Grandpa, just the man with boundless love for us and many others. You have inspired us to reach beyond ourselves and follow your example. You have filled each of us with so much love, such that we are able to and want to share our love with others. Our promise to you is that we will each strive to create our own communities and families that are bound by the same love that you have taught us. We are proud to call you Grandpa. For one final time, goodbye, and we love you. Love you so much, Josh, Andrew, Brian, Lila, Sam, and Bella.
My comments are focused on the lessons learned from Arnold, and I'm sure many of you will be able to relate to many of these. Communication. There are no trivial or superficial conversations. Ask questions and listen to the answer. You do not need to be the smartest in the room. Just work hard and keep your eyes and your ears open. Patience. Arnold was a contradiction on patience. He wanted it right now, but yet he worked on experiments for many, many years. Act or do. Arnold was all about getting things done. Adversity shaped Arnold and pushed him. Growing up as a poor kid in Chicago was never forgotten and shaped his very core and drove him. Set high standards and live up to them. We were always pushed by Arnold, but he pushed himself even harder and to even higher standards. Be a student of life. always be learning, evolving, and growing. Arnold was always happy to speak to others, and yes, he wanted to share his insights, but he was always learning and growing, and he was always thinking. Be generous. Arnold was always over the top generous with his time, with his wisdom, and his love. A Dr. Seuss quote that Arnold lived by: be who you are and say what you feel, for those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Love. Love hard and deep. Arnold cared for others even more than himself. We, the collective we, were always placed ahead of himself. Believe in yourself. Arnold worked hard to build us all up. He loved hard and was quick to give feedback, but as I said, he loved hard. Spend as much time with those you love and have real conversations. He loved his family over the moon. No spending time, just spending time together for meals, vacations, or just dropping by. That was his priority, and he took particular pleasure in any and all of those occasions. And last, and most importantly, the lesson that we all learn and know. I know that he loved every one of us, but he loved his family the most. How do I know this? Because he told all of us he loved us frequently and to his very last breath. Thank you.
We all felt similarly, so there will be some repetitiveness. As I pondered how to sum up over 5 decades with my dad, I thought of simply saying, it wasn't enough. And it wasn't enough for our kids. We left nothing unsaid with our actions and with our words, but it wasn't enough. Or, since my kids love to make acrostics on cards for Grandpa, carefully picking a word that described my dad, and then making sure the first letter of those words spelled Grandpa, I thought, I could do that without crying. But to pick a few words to summarize my dad feels too simple. And there was nothing simple about my dad. He lived his life building deep, meaningful connections, and he had a ferocious need to make an impact on both people and the world. Sorry. While these past 6 weeks were intense and horrible, it brought out the best in our family, and there was always some humor. My dad found it remarkably gratifying and sweet to hear from people from all corners of the world and to be able to express his love in return. Definitely a complex guy. As Rabbi Scoff and others have said, he didn't do small talk. When he asked, "How are you?" he actually wanted to know in detail. In college and when I lived out of state, since a quick fine wasn't satisfying to him, he'd magically create speaking engagements a few times a year that required him to be in my city. Long dinners with just the two of us created the opportunity to catch up on the things that really mattered: relationships, goals, and the interesting nuances of crazy lives. This no small talk extended even to our kids. Our oldest, Lila, and my dad had such a wonderful relationship that my heart feels full just thinking about it. Oh, God, I need another tissue. Should have gone with the acrostic. They took beach walks together, and he would drive her home after dinner at their house, and she'd arrive feeling loved, with a huge smile, bursting to tell us about the fascinating things they discussed. Before COVID, on the yearly Christmas time train ride downtown, Bella would snuggle into her grandpa. And for weeks after, when I failed to answer her questions, regardless of topic, she'd promptly say, "Should we ask Grandpa?" As if he alone held all the answers. I always felt like family mattered above all else to my dad. Growing up, we ate dinner together as a family most nights, and the focus was always on me and Aaron. Even then, though occasionally I was irritated that I couldn't eat at a friend's house very often, my dad made us feel special and exceptional. He didn't just love family, he was fiercely loyal and fiercely protective. When Sam was in the NICU, my dad showed up early every morning to be with him because he saw it as his job and duty to help us. But he was also a softie, so the joy and tenderness he felt being with Sam created a very meaningful connection that endured. A significant part of my dad's success was due to his perseverance. He was resolute and committed to everything he undertook. I'm guessing you noticed that my dad had some strong opinions. In fact, it could be tough at times to get your argument out. My husband is likely nodding effusively at this because I've inherited these qualities. But if it was a worthy idea or it meant a lot to you, as my mom pointed out, he would come back to it even days later and engage in a real conversation on the topic. When we were making a go of cell bank, I would, for example, ask a very specific question about the benefits of autograph over allograph, and my dad's initial heated response was occasionally on the order of, "Because I said so." Or if he remembered we were supposed to be peers, he'd say the equivalent in science terms, "It has been well studied." And yet, on the way to a meeting, I realized that I had been heard. He had spent time thoughtfully analyzing my point or altering how he was thinking about it, and we'd engage in the topic until we were both satisfied. I know he took pride and joy in my desire to truly understand and believe in something before presenting it. And he taught me to marvel at and appreciate his scientific expertise in a way that still inspires me. Working together, the three of us took all of our relationships to a whole new level. Although we aren't rolling in cell bank money, even though we should be, I feel rich in having had the opportunity to really get to know and appreciate my dad and brother in a completely new way. I know my dad cherished this experience immensely. So many of the notes my dad received in these last weeks spoke of how he inspired, mentored, and supported people. I know my husband feels this way too. The guidance, insights, and more important, the friendship he's gotten along the way from my dad will stay with Dave forever. I will miss watching them seated next to each other at the end of family dinner, having their own private conversations. My whole life, my dad challenged me to reach higher in all areas of my life. Gosh, sorry. And he always strung the net below me, so I knew my leaps might miss the mark, but I'd be able to try again. Dad, my life is built on the values you held dear, and we will continue to instill these in our children. As you said to each of us before you left, I too will love you forever.
Please rise, everyone. El mole rachamim shochen bamromim hametzeh menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina b'malot kedoshim utehorim Ana bal harachamim hastirehu b'seter knafecha leolamim Utzror b'tzrorechem et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanoch b'shalom hamishkavo, v'nomar amen. May we remember all of the worthy and the righteous deeds that he performed while in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life. God is now his portion. May he rest in peace. And we all say amen. Let's be seated, everyone. We want to offer our condolences to the family, to Bonnie, to Aaron and Rachel, Tammy and David, to the grandchildren, Josh, Andrew, Brian, Lila, Sam, and Bella, Brother Herbert, and Barbara. The family will be now moving, and of course, we're going to move to the burial portion of the service. This evening, until 8:30, the family will be receiving visitors at Aaron and Tammy's residence in Beechwood. The address is 25455 Letchworth Road. Again, 25455 Letchworth Road in Beechwood. This evening until 8:30 p.m. Tomorrow, visitation will be from 2 to 4 p.m. and again from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. January 16th, 2 to 4 and 6:30 to 8:30. January 17th, 2 to 4 and 6:30 to 8:30. We're going to pause now to arrange the processional to the burial spot. Please remain, though, in your seats for a few more moments, and I'm going to ask the pallbearers to now come forward.